My name is Jeroen, and I'm here to give you a little bit of insight on English or British humor. It is clear that humor is far superior to humor. It's a quote by Oscar Wilde in which he gives his preference for English humor, British humor. You know, the humor with the U being English, without the U being American. So, going on to our lesson, what is typical British humor? In this class, I'll try to explain British humor to you, and I will do so by covering three chapters. First one, a piece of history, where I will try to explain how the British got their humor and how they use it. Number two, I will go by 8 themes that are typical for British humor. Some of these themes might come across to you as not funny at all. Chances are, if you're not British, most of them don't, but that's the main reason of explaining them. And then number three, British versus American humor. In this little chapter, I will try to show you that humor is culturally determined. And even though they speak the same language, they often don't understand each other. So, a tiny piece of history. The British used to have a class system. You had the working class, the middle class, and the upper class. Working class made fun of the middle class made fun of the working class, and everybody made fun of the upper class. This is rooted in 1,000 years of history. The irony is that during and after the Victorian era, people in colonized countries regarded the whole of England as upper class or oppressors, and so the British were being mocked by all the people they ever oppressed. There were quite a few people. So who do Britons make fun of? Well, the first rule, before we venture into that, who are being mocked by the British, we must first understand that the British, the humor is the default setting in British conversation. Unless it absolutely needs to be serious or with unfamiliar people, and often there is absolutely no intention of genuinely insulting. It's just their way of looking at life. So whenever you hear a Brit make a joke about someone else or a whole group of people, you must understand that Britons make fun of themselves too. Or better yet, they tend to ridicule themselves at every chance they get. They're masters at knowing their own flaws and ridicule them. But as all people do, the British also like to make fun of people from other countries. Normally, people tend to ridicule the country that's next to them. You know, us Dutchies making fun of the Belgians and the Germans. Okay, well, everybody makes fun of the Germans. America making fun of the Canadians. And as Britain has such a rich history in governing the world, they now make fun of everybody. They make fun of the French for World War II, Hundred-Year War, Napoleon. They make fun of the Indians for the accent. Hello, come again. They make fun of Germany for World War II and the supposed lack of sense of humor. They make fun of America for arrogance and lack of sophistication because they're all hillbillies, and the War of Independence, obviously. And there's this rivalry between England and other countries in the UK. You know, the English make fun of the Irish and the Scottish and Irish make fun of the English. And there's an example of great British mockery in a television series from the 80s called Allo Allo. It's about World War II resistance in France. In this series, no country escaped the satire of the Brits, not even the Brits, not even the Germans. Everybody was victimized. You can have a look at it at YouTube. Look at for a clip of Allo Allo, but remember it's a series, it's over 35 years old, might be a bit outdated. So 8 themes, and I'll just start off with the most important one of all. It's called irony. Irony is everywhere. It's used every day, it's used all day. And you stand in front of a window looking outside, it's raining cats and dogs, and you say, lovely, isn't it, dear? And you do this with number two, a deadpan face. A deadpan face is when you tell a joke, and no matter how ridiculous it is, you keep a straight face. Like, for instance, a goalkeeper that just lost 9-0 in an interview after the match, stating, I just played the match of my life, man. Or one of my personal favorites, I've seen this actress, Cara Delevingne, she was interviewed for a US television, and they asked her whether she read the John Green's book Paper Towns before she was starring in the movie, and Delevingne scoffed, and she looked at the interviewer and she replied, no, I never read a book with a script, I just winged it. So going straight on to numbers 3 and 4, and I'll start with number 4. It's self-deprecation. Self-deprecation is often used ironically. And almost always, here it is again, loving and reverent, to make light of the situation at hand, for instance. Well, I had an English friend of mine, and she told me once her hairdresser had died, and how she was an emotional wreck afterwards because her hairdresser was the only man in the world that knew how to handle her bundle of hair on her head. Yeah, I found that very amusing. Going back to number 3, sarcasm. Sarcasm lies really close to irony, but sarcasm is almost always used at someone else's expense, whereas irony is meant as a light form of mockery, often used against oneself with self-deprecation. Sarcasm is usually easy to detect because the speaker wants you to know you are being mocked, whereas the beauty in irony is that it often goes undetected. So, going on to 5. Puns. You cannot define British humour without puns. A pun is a play on words. They're everywhere. They're on shop fronts, headlines, advertisements, and the irony is that everybody hates them at the same time. But when they come across a really good one, they can't help but chuckle. This is probably one of the most hard forms of humour, English humour, British humour, to understand for non-English people because of a few reasons. One, you'll have to be fluently in English to understand what pun is, because you can read the pun, but you'll have to know what the original was. For instance, in the screen here, Planet of the Grapes is a pun on a movie, Planet of the Apes, Lord of the Flies, a book, Lord of the Flies, Nothing Really Matters, Metallica song, Nothing Really Matters. And number 2, puns often seem a bit childish or far-fetched, but it's a cultural thing, really. And they've been doing it, the British have been doing it, have been using them since forever. So why don't you have a go and come up with a good pun? Why don't you create a fictitious storefront or a newspaper headline using a witty pun? I'll go on with my video and you try to come up with a good pun. Yeah. So, number 6. It's an important one. Yeah, well, they're all important. Yes, they are all important, but this one either you have or you don't. It's called wit. It's a beautiful word, wit. It might depend on your character. Yeah? Humor only works when the timing and delivery are good, but if you don't have a funny remark or comment, you have nothing. So British are known for their wit. Wit is being clever and funny. But listen, it might depend on your character, because even if you do have the best remark ever, it still comes down to timing and delivery. So wit is being clever and funny, but the clever and funniness is a three-way of the remark, the timing, and the delivery. Brits see humor in almost everything, even in the most miserable situations. It's endearingly, but at the same time also functions as a defense mechanism. To make light of the hardest of times works like medicine, but only when the joke is in good taste. In most cultures, people tend to choose their timing carefully, but with the British, not so much the case. I have the next slide. And it's number 7. It's an easy one. It's banter. When you're amongst friends, chances are that at some point you'll be the subject of banter. Banter is verbally teasing someone or some people, but done in a light and friendly way. This is important because bullying is often excused as banter, and they are very, very different indeed. Banter only works when you're on the receiving end and you're okay with it. The Americans have something similar, and they call it to roast someone. You might have seen the television show, The Roast of, etc., etc. In my honest opinion, it's vastly different. A roast is more, well, it's less subtle. Banter is, here they are again, loving and reverent, while roast often isn't. Okay, here they come again, loving and reverent. For instance, a friend of mine once told me he was having his first driving lesson, and I asked him, quite panicked. I said, "Okay, where, when, what time?" And he asked, "Why? Why are you serious?" And I said, "So I can keep my wife and children inside for safety." Last but not least of the 8 themes is innuendo. Not just a very, very good song by Queen. Innuendo is the art of making remarks about matters that are taboo without actually referring to them. Often, or most of the time, sexually. Just as puns, puns and innuendo are often used together, innuendo can be found anywhere, but innuendo is very, very subtle. Even on shows as Great British Bake Off, the English Heel Holland Bakt, the presenters used phrases full of innuendo. So it goes to show that innuendo is for all the Brits, young and old. Once again, it's all about timing and delivery. So when a Brit comes up with a remark full of innuendo, he or she will do it with a deadpan face and probably reading the situation at hand so the joke comes in. You understand it, yet you cannot reply to it because that would embarrass you. Going on to British versus American humour. I found this line on the internet and I'll just run it by you. British humour is often said to go over the heads of everyone else in the world. Likely because it's far too sophisticated and too pretentious for anybody to really understand. But British, being British, all individually decided to pretend like they do understand, coming up with smart and sarcastic sounding nonsense to keep the game up all these years. I find that a very typical British way of explaining British humour to you. So, British versus American humour. Getting to know the difference between British and American humour is a basis to getting to know the difference between the culture of the two. And if you're a fan of either one of them, it's hard not to be prejudiced about the other one. So let's try and look at the two from a neutral point of view, shall we? There's a YouTube video here. I cannot show it to you, but it's an interview. It's an interview of Stephen Fry on American television, and there's an audience, and this guy in the audience asks Mr. Fry what he thinks is the difference between British and American humour. So Stephen Fry goes on explaining the history, humour of both sides. And at one point he says, do you know that scene on Animal House where there's a fellow playing the folk guitar? John Belushi comes in, grabbing the guitar, smashing it, breaking it to pieces against the wall, and then wiggling his eyebrow like so to the camera. Well, a British comedian would want to play the folk singer. Kind of sums it up. So, it's not that either one is better or funnier. There's great comedy written on both sides of the pun, but there are differences. As I said earlier, Brits like to make fun of themselves and don't take themselves too serious, whereas Americans tend to make fun of others. American humour is more optimistic, where the main character of the joke ends on top. Often used comedic features are slapstick or physical comedy, and in Britain there's more use of dry, self-deprecating humour. So you have pessimism versus optimism. You have dry humour versus slapstick. You have subtle jokes versus in-your-face comedy. But when comedy is written, we see there are also differences in the storylines. If you compare sitcoms from both countries, for instance, we see that British sitcoms tend to end in disaster, giving the audience room to fill in what would happen next. But American sitcoms tend to have a happy ending, or at least a closed ending, where the comedian ends on top with the girl and the muscles and the money. And well, this is also to be seen in the way people joke with one another. An American is more likely to make a joke about someone else. The joke would be very recognizable as a joke and most of the times only explainable in one way. But a Brit would make the joke about themselves. The joke would often be explainable in more than one way and delivered with a seriousness that you might not even recognize it as a joke. Well, that was it. I hope now I have a bit of an idea about British humour and how humour works on the west side of the North Sea. Thank you for watching me. My name is Jeroen and you've all been marvellous.